Shilpi, can I ask you to go ahead on behalf of UNDP to maybe take the first stab and share your thoughts? And just to outline, I think it'll be good to start first with what exactly is circular economy. And there was a lot of time this discussion that circular economy and waste management is something different. Maybe if you could just like to take 5 minutes and just set the ground and context about why circular economy is important, what it is. And then maybe I would like to invite Shalini after that to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. First of all, I would like to thank CSR Box for arranging this entire platform and really privileged to be part of such eminent panelists. To start with waste management and circular economy, yes, we understand that right now the status of waste management is what taking us to a point we call as recycling. Without a proper waste management, recycling would be again a challenge. And when we talk about recycling, it's more about a process rather than and holistic approach. So, looking at the entire ecosystem of resources, environment, communities, and governance, when we talk about the entire ecosystem, the word circular economy make its place into it. And if we look at the global perspective, it's only 9% of the global economy is as such circular economy, and still we are dealing with the linear trend of make, use, and dispose pattern. So to have a better perspective of circular economy established along all these sectors, it has to deal with the entire product value chain. It should start with how the resources to be used and how the resource cascading can happen as a waste of one sector can be used as a resource for another sector. And when we are talking about the product value chain, we should not leave the aspects of communities, the communities that are involved in various waste management activities, the requirement of businesses to take leadership on improving the entire value chain, and wherever we feel that there is a strengthening required, say it's skilling of a government in waste management agency or a government waste management staff, or a skilling of a waste worker who is working at a recycling industries. So everything has to be taken accounted. A socio-technical approach has to be brought into it. Resource efficiency has to be brought into it. So when we talk about all these key factors, then we start talking about circular economy. Yet we are not establishing a circular economy. So it has to be more resource efficient. It has to be a more accountable and traceable system. It has to take into consideration the communities right from the top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid. It has to be environment friendly. It has to support at the end of the day. It has to be environment friendly. So when we address all these small chain points of the entire value chain, then the economy becomes a circular economy. Recycling standalone is a process, and for a better recycling, we need a better circular economy approach. Mr. Agarwal, you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks. That was a very wonderful, I think, captured it very well. I think the alarming number which I got from what you said was that only 9% of the world economy currently seems to be circular. And I mean, with the kind of concern that we have about waste management and resources running out, and it's 2020 and we are just at 9%. I would leave it to the other panelists, and maybe you can come back again. And when do we get to 50%? And anybody has any guess on that? So with that, can I invite you, Shalini, to maybe add to what Shilpi has said, and maybe I'll introduce some new points.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rishi. And it was very kind of like Shilpi, you were actually speaking my thoughts. And Rishi, when you said that 9% is alarming for you, here I am with some more figures which are even more alarming when we talk about India and the way we are progressing. I was looking at the Indian statistics. So some statistics are really very scary. We are almost 18% of the world population, and we are the third largest carbon dioxide emitter in the world, which is like almost 7% of the global emissions. So which is huge. Despite India being an agrarian society, our water consumption for agriculture is the highest. Not just that, our productivity levels are low and our extraction levels are high. These two things makes circular economy an extremely important agenda or on every single industrial sector. So I'm not even talking about one industrial sector, but all. So coming back to your point, when you said, what is the difference between recycling and waste management and circular economy? So, this is one thing that pains me when I see that people, when they are talking about circular economy, they are unfortunately referring it only as recycling. But I would say recycling comes at the end of the life cycle of a product, whereas circular economy talks about the entire life cycle of a product, right from designing, like Shilpi said. It's uh, it's a designer is incorporating circular economy when they are developing a design so that the product lasts longer. Then comes the usage. How do we reduce the usage and keep that product longer in the value chain? Efficiency of the product is extremely important in circular economy. So system designing, product designing, making the product reusable for a longer time, then making the product reusable again and again. It's not just one product life cycle, but more than one product life cycle. And at the end of it, what to do with the product rather than throwing it into the landfill? How do we still use that material, if possible, in any which way, which we call it as upcycling, if possible? And then we come to a kind of scenario where we can say that we are talking about circular economy. But unfortunately, it's not just India. I'm not just talking about India. Globally, this is the pattern that people are talking uh, about recycling as circular economy. I was actually with an international conference only yesterday where they were all experts from all over the world, but they didn't know, are we talking, when we even talk about plastics? So circular economy is very largely confused even at the international level with plastics and recycling. So the thought process has to be changed. There is a huge difference between waste management and circular economy, and that needs to be talked now, and that need to be understood by the industry, by the innovators who are coming up, and the researchers of our country. And I think a lot of work is being done. The positive side is that a lot of work is being done. I see a lot of people coming up with solutions which are circular. But yes, once they get to know a little more about the business models, I think we can hone their business models into better circular models, as to say. I'll keep it short and precise, Rishi.
No, thanks. And thanks. I know that all the panelists are cooperating very well, considering that we started a bit late and we had to hard stop at 4 because one of them has to leave. We can continue for a little longer. But Shalini, you introduced some very interesting points, and I would, before I go to the our other fellow panelists, if you can just, conceptually, it was great what you mentioned. But if you can just bring in few specific product examples, and specifically in the context of India. And not just that, when you mentioned that there is some great work going on, it'd be good if in the second round you can get a bit more specific and share for the benefit of the audience. There are almost 150 people attending this panel.
Oh, yes, Rishi, it will be a privilege. I can talk about it at length, multiple things that I can talk about. Do you want me to talk now or maybe later?
No, we'll come in the second round. I'm saying just be prepared. And also, Shilpi, I would request the same thing. I would like to first give one round to everybody. Is Sandeep there or Ram?
I'm here.
Yeah. So Sandeep, because we are just back to back, I would like to bring you in because Shalini just mentioned about the whole conflict with the waste management and recycling and plastic. And you're one of the foremost people in the country right now working on waste management and MRFs. Would you like to share your thoughts or also counter what has been shared by the previous two speakers?
So I think, everybody has realized that the same process flow or the same path we'll have to take to really reach circular economy. most important, means from a practical experience on the ground and trying to doing it at scale, it is, the stakeholder expectation and managing the stakeholder expectation. It's a crazy situation to be in. And more importantly, private sector and government and trying to align everybody's expectations, and at the same time doing it the right way. So it's a circular economy is not an easy thing to really achieve, not because it's not doable. It is because matching the expectation of every stakeholder is it's a very tricky situation to be in. Plus, to create that infrastructure to really service those expectations. So, means I was lucky enough to get a lot of support in very early days. So, I survived lots of ups and downs. And recently, I also managed to place a larger round. So, I am well placed to survive further. But I think circular economies, all stakeholders need to realize that there is a cost involved in reaching a particular level, after which it will become sustainable. That is first thing. Then secondly, definitely, everybody has to let go, because, we're talking about textiles. So I've been working with one fashion designing house, and I'm lucky to say that, means they are also understanding that there's a cost. So they are bearing some cost, I'm bearing some cost, trying to achieve. So since last 8 months, we are doing very interesting stuff on the textile side of it. We already do for paper, we already do for plastics, and for plastics also we are seeing a lot of strategic tie-ups and partnerships coming up, where people are now realizing that there needs to be a two-way communication and expectation matching. Yes, we need to bring in government also, because waste is something where government will not be able to really bypass. So they need to understand that the private sector can do a lot of stuff, but the models in which we are really operating to go from 9% to 50%. So I was laughing when you say 50%, and I was just imagining that it takes me almost 9 to 12 months to create one infrastructure of 300 tons per day. That will translate to about 90,000 metric tons per annum. And the amount of infrastructure creation which needs to be done in right spirit, we have a long way to go, unless and until the stakeholder alignment really happens.
So I think great, Sandeep. I think the key word which I heard again and again, what you were mentioning, was the stakeholder alignment and the matching. And maybe I would like to later on ask Shilpi to comment on that part, because as a UN agency, I mean, we don't have anybody from the government right now. And I understand that UN is not representing the government, but still at the policy level, what are the kind of changes? I mean, here we have heard somebody who's an entrepreneur working on the ground, setting things up. And at the policy level, we have people, and there are people at the academic level. And ultimately, I think the first expectation matching has to happen between these people itself before we move ahead. So having said that, I would like to invite Ram, who's got a great level of experience, and he's working with a very large corporate house based in India. And it was good to see the video which you had shared, Ram, and we look forward to sharing your input. So kindly, yeah.
Any particular aspect you would like to highlight? I mean, because for
the
me,
role of industry, I think it will be good if you can just share what is the role
because
of industry.
Yeah, very interesting, because you mentioned the fact that we're a large conglomerate. That itself brings with itself a lot of challenges, because no two businesses are alike. I think that's fundamentally one of the things we have to understand while solving any sustainability challenge, and I include circularity in that, is that we need to come up with bespoke solutions for the industries. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think really important thing, and the agro business has been the leader in the circular space, mainly because I would say the really most important thing that helped them achieve this level of circularity was the outreach with the ecosystem, the farmers, the people who are the additional parts of the value chain. I think too often when you look at circularity, we look very much within the fence. I think that is the biggest barrier to overcome. I think some of the earlier speakers mentioned about the life cycle approach, and at Godrej now what we've done is, with the idea of circularity being at the center of our sustainability, the life cycle approach is now going to be the basis for all future sustainability decisions. We are very clear about that, because it's sort of the second or the evolutionary stage of sustainability, you can say. For the first 10 years of the sustainability journey at Godrej, from 2011 to 20, we focus on the process. How do we make our processes more water efficient, more energy efficient, more packaging efficient, let's do that. But what we realize is that when we start doing the first batch of LCA studies is that you might be tackling the problem at the wrong stage of the life cycle. So very often you realize when you do the LCA is that the real environmental footprint is happening somewhere else entirely in the life cycle. Maybe it's in the logistics or very often in the use phase. For consumer products, you'll be surprised. I'll just give you an example of our Goodnight LV product. The biggest environmental footprint is at the use stage of the consumer process. So that's a new challenge for us because traditionally our control or our this thing ends the minute the product passes into the hands of the consumer. But I think sooner or later, companies are going to have to think about how they're going to influence sustainable consumption as well. And I think that is, these are the key touch points in order to enable greater circularity, because even if one or two links are missing, the entire objective of the circle is it has to be continuous. When you start having missing links in between, the entire thing becomes inefficient. And when it becomes inefficient, it becomes cost ineffective, and then the entire idea dies. So I think what the advice I would probably give to other corporates, and I think a lot of other companies also doing it in this way, is don't start off with circularity as a huge concept and build it at a group level. Take an individual business or even an individual, like a product line, and start building a circular product line completely for one particular product. And that itself will give you a lot of lessons on how to build it up. Don't start too big. Whittle it down, narrow it down, focus on a single product, focus on single supply chain, single value chain, and try linking all the pieces there. I think that is the first step if you really want to, if you achieve a really good circularity model. I think for now, I'll stick with it because there are a lot of speakers to get to, so I'll answer the other questions.
No, no, Ram, if I can ask 2 points to you right away.
Sure.
One is that what exactly drives the Godrej Group to get into it? I mean, is there the usual thing with corporates or the business world is unless there is no consumer push, nobody does anything. So what exactly is the driver?
I think we're seeing a growing consumer push, but I don't think that is the main driver today, because it also depends on which area of the market or which slab of the pyramid you are basically working in. Let's just take soaps, for example. Now, a consumer who is consuming product like a Lush or a Body Shop may be more inclined to spend a little bit more for a sustainable or greener product. But somebody who's buying a Lifebuoy or a Dettol or Hamam may not. I'm not saying they definitely are not. But I think we're seeing with the generational shift that's happening, we're seeing more responsible consumption and more consumers who want information about what they're consuming. And we're getting more and more feedback from a consumer saying that they actually want to know how much of it is organic, how much of it is ethically sourced. So these kind of questions are coming up more and more with the next generation of consumers. So I think there will be a pull factor that is growing, but the biggest factor is still, it just makes good business sense. I really, every such panel when I'm speaking, a lot of people say, oh, how do you balance business interests with sustainability? I don't see them being at all. If anything, if you start looking at the kind of money you're spending later on your packaging, EPR, or your carbon sequestration, or your water management, you are consuming with the left hand and then spending later with the right hand. Instead, when you start introducing circularity in the idea of pricing, for example, a carbon price or a water price internally, which then helps you make better decisions, both from a sustainable perspective as well as a business perspective. So I know the drive is purely because we realize that this is going to be the fundamental ethos of business in the next 10 years. I would not be surprised in 2030, you start seeing companies report a green P&L rather than just a traditional financial P&L. You will start seeing your carbon, your carbon bank or your water positivity, all these things being reported because investors are genuinely making decisions based on these factors. Right? It's no longer just one of those things that we say investors are, they may be interested. This is something that you get blowback or feedback on a very regular basis. I cannot tell you the number of times over the last year people have asked us, number of investors have asked for example, when are you taking up science-based initiatives? When are you going to move to a zero plastic economy? So these are not just questions coming up from the media or from the society. These are investor questions. So it is very much business driving sustainability rather than, they're interlinked. I don't think they're at odds at all with each other.
Excellent, Ram. I think some very good points. I hope by 2030, we're getting to where you are envisaging us to be at. So I'll come to Shalini, because Shalini, you had mentioned that and we discussed. So if you would like to come back with some of the points we discussed and case studies, specifically what's happening, that'll be great.
Okay. Thank you, Rishi, once again. And it's very, very nice to hear that Ram, you are already into the life cycle assessments because not many companies have actually started that. And like you said, when you actually get into the life cycle assessments, then you tend to realize where is the actual harm happening. Because otherwise, we would think that this is, and most of the times, logistics and reverse logistics play an important role. And not only to saying logistics, please understand, I'm also including the reverse logistics, because even if there is an EPR, uh, has I mean, the companies are following EPR because they are supposed to follow, and otherwise there are penalties for that. But is EPR also kind of helping only to reduce? Does it not have its own carbon footprint? Is very, very important to understand because it has a huge reverse logistics. And what about reverse logistics when it is interstate or intercontinental? Then it is even huge. So that's very, very important what one needs to think about. When you said, Rishi, about the case studies, there are several case studies to begin with. One of them being the Hilton Hotel, which had started very long back in 1997 in Sweden, and the idea was to reduce their carbon footprint. So what they did was they actually reduced their water consumption, and they saw that if we were to, so first they did a life cycle assessment, and they saw that the major carbon footprint generation of that organization was happening uh, at the level of electricity consumption, the heating of the entire hotel. And what they did was they said, okay, if we need to reduce that, we need to switch over from the fossil fuel based energy to the green renewable energy. And they started switching to it. The other was the water wastage. So they adopted several policies to reduce that. So what they were able to do is just by these two things, they reduced their energy consumption by almost 19.3% and water by 24%. So this was something that helped them. And this was to do this, they had to have a lot of other circular practices coming in. They reached Philips, and Philips did help them in the changing of the model. So the model of product-based energy was changed to product as a service thing. So this business model entirely changed, where Philips was no more giving them the tube lights or LEDs to install and then nothing to do with the organization, but they said, okay, we will take care of the product. So that is how one of the business models develop. And that is one business model which is now coming out to be very effective when we talk about circular economy, which makes the manufacturer as well as the consumer responsible for the product. And that definitely helps in increasing the lifespan of the object that we are talking about, any consumable product. Then the second one, I would say, when it comes to India, when I work with the startups, one of them, I have these two examples which I can quote, and these are something that we worked on, increasing the product lifespan of the used products already. So one was books. We all have kids, and we all know that usually what is happening is we all are buying new set of books in every academic year, and these books are of no use at the end of the academic year. So these books only serve one life cycle. Whereas if you really get into a business model where you're recycling or reusing that book, or you are renting out that book to someone, then the book can even last. A study said that it would even last 4 to 5 life cycles as compared to the previous model. So that is one very good model where you can increase the lifespan. The second one was the costumes, where the older costumes, by redesigning and upcycling them, could again or the rental model. So we introduced a rental model with one of our clients. The idea was to use the products which are lying in our cupboard for a very long time and not in use. So what we did was we started renting them out. It would earn some money for the person who started the business, and it would increase the lifespan, and that cloth which was ultimately entering the landfill is not is actually living more lifespans before it ends up in the landfill. So there are, and these we can find such business models evolving everywhere. And when he said, I think someone mentioned about the agriculture being one sector which adopted to it very much, because agriculture, I think, is one sector where we are very much grounded and still using many old practices that could be brought in. So India, I think, when I see at a global platform, India has a huge scope of bringing in and imbibing the circular principles. Reason being, we didn't have the privilege to kind of waste things, and it has recently started to happen that maybe a couple of decades, we can say, when we got into the globalization and industrialization circle. But then we know how can we go circular. If we talk to our parents, if we talk to our family, we will definitely find those solutions within ourselves. So a little bit of scientific approach and technology added with the prior practice, traditional practices, I think India has a huge scope to get into the circular economy. Yeah.
So, Shalini, some of the examples which you shared, I was wondering whether those are more like efficiency, which is engineering, as opposed to maybe going to the drawing board or having a very fundamental relook. I mean, say in the case of mobile phones, there's the classic example of planned obsolescence, where say some of the big smartphone manufacturers will deliberately keep doing changes so that you have to keep buying new models. I mean, that kind of a thinking is completely kind of at loggerheads, and I don't know whether it has stopped and whether the consumer demand will or pressure will stop it, or law and policy will stop it. So I just want to leave you with that thought, and maybe if you can come back on that before I just go to Shilpi once and share her thoughts. And after that, Ram, I know that you have to go, but if you can share a specific example, say in the agro space, that'll be good. So Shilpi, would you like to share something? Hello.
Shilpi, you are on mute.
Sorry. So thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal. Hearing to all the other panelists, right, the way Mr. Sandeep said that stakeholders alignment is such an important aspect. So in the projects we are doing with UNDP, we would say that although we are very closely working with the government stakeholders, but just a difference of opinion among the government stakeholders and the way we want to implement the project could be very challenging aspects to make changes on the field. So yes, definitely stakeholder alignment, right? Whether we talk about the Safai Sathis, the waste workers in the field, or whether we talk about the government stakeholders or the private organizations who are coming ahead and keeping their opinion that they just don't want EPR, but they need a larger social change to have happen. So this is also a very important aspect. And the way Shalini pointed out so many things on social aspects, on the way of sustainability, definitely right from the design of the product and the longevity of the product, what happens when its first life will end and how will it enter to the second life, the framework, the legislative frameworks or the policies, how things will happen. These are very important to establish a circular economy. And it's a very much a collective approach. It's an ecosystem approach. It cannot be done by an individual agency or just an individual change maker. We need alignment of the government. We need alignment of the private sector. We need alignment of the social startups, the CSOs. Then only these changes can be brought into the system.
So Shilpi, I'm hearing that we need. I mean, it almost seems that we are still not there. And almost the picture I get, I mean, between Sandeep and you, what you're saying is that there are still a lot of difficulties in a very, because unless we don't get the key stakeholders together, there is no way we can have traction ahead. And I would like to hear Sandeep maybe spell out some of the very pointed critical areas where I think we need improvement or which obstacles which need to be removed, so that 9 to 50%, which Sandeep also was laughing. I mean, we can get to that 50%, at least 25%, Sandeep, if you're okay with that. But before all of this, I think I was just seeing the question box. And Ram, I think there are some questions for the Godrej group. There is Nalini and Hamsa. And I know that you have to leave at 4 o'clock. So maybe I'm just kind of stepping in. If the panelists just permit me, we'll just take these two questions and they might be pertinent. One question is from Nalini. Are there any initiatives taken by Godrej for EPR in CFL bulk waste handling in India? And quickly, I'll just come to the second one. I think this is Hamsa. She is asking, does being aligned to CE principles and practice influence in the environmental projects that Godrej supports through its CSR? So
Sure.
CFL and the CSR.
The first one's very easy to answer because that actually falls under Godrej Invoice. So that's a separate. We don't the CFL lights here, but I'm happy to connect whoever's there with the team at Godrej Invoice because they are a separate and they have their own good and green policy and their EPR targets and stuff. But in regards to generally in terms of educating our customers for the consumer product, I can say definitely there's a lot of work being done on certain products, especially like what Shalini had earlier said, we realize the products where the use case can make a real high environmental impact. And at least for those products, we are using our marketing and our collaterals to reach out to the consumers to make them more aware of how to sustainably consume this particular product. The second question, I believe it's how we are...
Your CSR spends are integrated with your CE principles.
Yeah, so in general, so we have our CSR falls broadly under two categories. It's called good and green. So good is the social impact work that we do. The green is the environmental impact. And in terms of environmental impact, there are two main areas where we've focused on. One was in order to the aligning with the principles of overall carbon neutrality. We worked a lot on carbon sequestration projects on one end, afforestation, carbon sequestration, that did guide some of the projects we did. But we don't claim any carbon credits because we are not looking to get into that trading thing at all. It's purely to look at, it's the personal responsibility, how much carbon we're emitting and trying to offset that with, carbon sequestration projects. I'll come to why that approach has changed in a bit. But also the other principle, we are also looking at some waste management projects, purely because from a consumer products industry, we are very, very cognitive of our huge plastic footprint. So we have put in several CSR projects now, two very interesting one in Pondicherry and one in Konark, where we're actually working with the local municipalities to not just establish the infrastructure for processing, because very honestly, I think many of the other experts who are on this panel who are in waste management will tell you that there isn't really a lack of technology or number of providers or number of suppliers for this technology. What really is missing is the linkages. It's about how do you make sure you get segregated and quantum of waste to these people. So I think that is the area in which we're working on. It's more of engaging with the community leaders to encourage segregation at source, then providing them also with the infrastructure, both in terms of mobile units to carry the waste as well as building the plants to process this waste. So it's an end-to-end, it's a complete circular waste management system that we're trying to build in Pondicherry and in Konark with two separate NGOs that we're working over there. Briefly, the third aspect of our environmental sustain CSR projects is water. We have worked with NABARD on about 5 or 6 watershed projects now across 6 different states in Central and South India, especially the very, very water-stressed ones like Beed in Maharashtra, where we've done watershed projects essentially. So NABARD has a fantastic scheme where they match your funding, whatever funding we can do, NABARD matches it. So we're really able to scale up the size of these projects. As of 2020, as for the Godrej Industries and Associate Companies Group, we are at about 450% water positive, which is basically for every 1 liter of water that we extract, we are adding 4.5 liters back into the ground. But we are not stopping there because we realize that water is one of those things. So without a water price, it's meaningless to consider water positivity as a positive, because we really need to try and achieve zero liquid discharge at most of our facilities. So that's the work we're doing within the fence. Beyond the fence, we'll continue to invest in watershed projects wherever we can. So that is in line with CSR. But I just want to make a very, very quick point about carbon neutrality. This is one of those cases where it's adapting with the time. When we started off in 2011, carbon neutrality was the way we wanted to tackle carbon. 20 years older, it's more about science-based targets. So we've realigned. We've realized that the offset mechanism, what we did earlier was one way of doing it, but the really impactful working towards is the 1.5 degree target. So now we've realigned towards the SBTs, and all the 4 companies under the JLAC group are now signatories to the SBT, science-based targets.
Excellent. Thanks, Ram, for those very insightful points and very a lot of information. I hope that answered the question of the attendees. Maybe we'll have time. I don't know, it's 6 minutes. You said 4 o'clock hard stop, but if there is time, then we'll come back again to some of the points. I would now like to maybe invite Sandeep. Actually, it's open to all now because see again, this has been a very difficult year, and we've seen huge amount of economic losses, job losses. Uh, what role do we see, say, circular economy or waste management in being able to give an impetus to the economy, creating jobs and making it win-win in terms of meeting our sustainability targets and also its potential? And maybe Sandeep, if you would like to go ahead first, and any numbers or any thoughts on that.
See, for me, the numbers only focus on making it profitable. So any activity which I try to do, I try to see how it can sustain on its own in the long run. Definitely, we burn a lot of money establishing that, but it has been a key focus. During COVID, yes, we had the challenge because we stopped our operation for almost 2 months because people were scared, not because we did not have waste, we did not have, but people were scared. There was a lot of uncertainties. As an organization, we ensured people who got paid, people got full, and the money reached even for waste because money reached to their homes and the food was ensured. So as an organization, we did what we could, right? But what we also realized is there are a lot of unorganized sector guys, either into weaving or into textile and business. They have suffered a lot. So in last few months, we are also building circular economy models for converting textile waste along with the carding waste, which we generate from post-consumer textile waste, into blankets and clothes for poor children and all that. So we have started doing some initiatives with some help groups to really start entrepreneurship at local level, where they can make 10, 12, 15,000 rupees at rest working from home. So those initiatives we have started, but as a business, for us, the more waste we handle, more entrepreneurs we create. That's the whole philosophy. So we don't own any vehicles as such as a company. We always create entrepreneurs who lease out vehicles, earn more they work kind of model. We support a lot of SMEs on raw material sourcing and making upskilling their product, improving the quality of the product for tying up with brand partners and their consumption. So companies which are seeking packaging material of a certain standard, we work with our supply partners to ensure. So I think bringing sustainability into other partner and value chain partnerships is bringing more support to them and create more employment. As an entrepreneur, I always realize, it's important to train people or benefit them for the long run and the short term. So for me, it's always about, creating that value chain and making sustainable. And while doing it, even, I always burn money initially trying to, establish a system. So I think to understand from the mistakes we make or, the process. So, for just the learnings which we have created. So I operate at 100 tons or above scale in a lot of geographies. There is a group on Telegram which I created just to share the knowledge. I think you are also part of that. Just to share knowledge with entrepreneurs that they don't repeat the same mistake again, because the 2025 or 2050 goal, from 9% to 50%, if we have to reach, then we need more people to really do what I'm trying to do, or we all are trying to do here. So I think the idea is to dissipate more knowledge and the culture of creating more entrepreneurship and sustainable business models. But yes, a lot of people sometimes do believe that, I take a very different way to doing experimentation. But, sometimes somebody has to do that just to create a benchmark about what is the best practice to really follow to sustain. So that's how I look at it.
Okay. So, but again, just coming back, you see job creation potential in this sector.
It is.
There is, right? And so that's what, in fact, I would like to maybe Shilpi or Shalini also to comment on that specific aspect. And then possibly Ram, if you want to speak first, Ram, in case you're leaving. You're on mute.
Yeah, I was just about to leave. So very quickly, can just repeat the question so I make sure I give a very answer.
The job creation potential. Do you see that?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting aspect. I'll just, with one sentence, I'll try and cover it. Greater efficiencies means greater automation, greater use of technology does not mean a loss of jobs. It generally means creation of jobs in an alternate or a parallel sphere. That's very critical to understand. It's time we start scaling people for the jobs of the future, not for the jobs of the present. I'll just leave it with that. I really have to leave right now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ram. Yeah. Thank
So
you very
Rishi,
much.
just to add to Ram's point, a lot of people always ask me that, you are bringing technology into waste management and you will do away with a lot of jobs. But what I've realized is I have employed more people just because of that. The reason being the scale at which I am operating. The facilities which there were only 50 people, I have 400, 500 people operating in those facilities. And I think the chain effect on the parallel effect on the SMEs where we are supplying, they are also doing better and much better. So technology allows the impact to be at scale, but does not do away with people's jobs and all that.
But are you talking informal jobs or skilled jobs which require
I
very
think both.
specific? Both.
Both. Means informal also. I think a lot of people are seeing opportunity, which is much more organized play, and definitely even on the skill side of it, waste management sector, which normally people did not see how technology would work in India. We are actually showcasing how people from very unique backgrounds are joining our team and using their skills to improvise the processes.
Great. Shilpi, would you like to add something on that?
Yes, rightly said by Sandeep. I'll second his thought completely that creating a larger infrastructure at a scale will create jobs at scale. Now, since we are moving our project from an urban settlement to a rural settlement, we realized that the moment we entered into a rural settlement to establish a better waste management and emphasize more on recycling and adopt more a circular economy, we had to generate jobs. We did generate jobs, right from community mobilizers to small innovators and entrepreneurs to sort out small problems which are village specific. So definitely when we are improving any system in any strengthening any businesses or improving anything which was not there, or say we are introducing any technology, we will talk about scale and we will talk about profitability, and then eventually the numbers of the job creation will increase at every level. So yes, when we talk about circular economy or an efficient waste management or a resource efficient recycling, definitely at each level there will be job creation. One of the example which I think Shalini just said, that giving a second life to books or giving a second life to costumes. So yes, there has to be people behind it. There has to be humans behind it, without which, without human innovation, any technology intervention will need human minds, and human mind means job creation.
Great. Thanks, Shalini. Thanks, Shilpi. Shalini, would you like to add to some of the points which Shilpi made? And
Yeah. Rishi, well, every single speaker has resonated my thoughts, so there is not much of a difference. I would say yes, there is only one point to add. There will be a lot of job creation, and I'm sure circular economy brings a huge potential of job creation. Only thing that would change is maybe the skill sets. The skill set may be slightly different, but people are going to change with the coming up innovations and the changing business models. The skill set that would be required with for the new models would change, but the job creation will be huge. There was one study I'm not able to figure out. I was trying to find out and Google that, but there is a study done by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which also suggests huge growth in GDP, and they even said that the GDP of India could rise. They have made a comparison between the linear model and the circular model, which also includes, by the way, the job creation. How much job creation and how much increase in GDP India could have in a circular model as compared to the linear model. So I also described this in my book very precisely. The second thing I think when we were talking about the law of obsolescence, Rishi, you did mention about it very shortly. But what did happen was the law of obsolescence is something which is built in by the industry to push more sales, because this is what the industry is driven by profit, and profit is their business, so it's not wrong from their perspective, so they will always look at that huge number, fine. But the only thing is that changing or removing, like you said, will it be diminished with with time. We don't see that happening because there is a huge lobby. There is a huge interest of people into building in obsolescence. So it might take a huge long period for us to get into that practice. It is going to be there, but then how to still build in some kind of circularity around that will remain as a challenge, and I'm sure we'll find out ways to that. Sandeep, to add your thing, you did mention somewhere about uh, learning as you are progressing, and there were certain models where you thought that they were not very successful, and so you're learning from that. Let me also tell you from an international perspective, I'm telling every single model, every single thought process is evolving when it comes to circular economy. It's a new concept. Even in Europe, I mean, we think that it is well developed in Europe. It's not so. It's at very nascent stages in Europe. They people are also trying. Businesses are evolving, and so is India doing. So I think congratulations to you for having a forward thought process and evolving in your business. So that should be a learning for every one of us. I think I've answered your question, Rishi.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even though I almost at the point where you mentioned profits, it almost seems that that still has to be the core, and whatever is left behind is what has to be addressed. I mean, Apple has to still have $100 billion surplus before we can talk circular economy. They will not part with any part of their $100 billion
Yeah,
surplus or whatever that
definitely,
is.
Rishi. To add to this, I just am reminded about the German Coal Commission report. So when you talked about the job creation, this is a policy which came in Germany, and what they did was they are phasing out coal, and they said by 2030 we will do away with all thermal power producing plants, and we will switch to our 100% renewable energy, because they saw that the biggest carbon footprint come from the energy sector. And not just for Germany, this is true for all countries whatsoever. But what Germany did was, it's a very forward looking report, and I think everyone who's dealing with carbon footprint should read this report, which says that uh, the when they are switching to renewable energy, they are also talking about employing the labor, employing the people who are there in the energy sector to shift and to skill them from thermal power to the renewable energy. So what they are saying is not just phasing out coal, but along with phasing out coal, they are not doing away with the people. They are employing people, keeping them in the energy sector, if not thermal, then renewable. So this is the kind of approach that we need to take and employ people all through in different sectors.
I think in the context of India, it would be a separate 1 hour discussion whether we are doing something of that sort or not. We don't have that much time. I can see Pooja over there, and I think she's trying to remind that, yes, how much time do we have, Pooja? 5-10 minutes, I think.
Sir, we are already waiting for the next panel now. I would really request you to wrap it up.
So just Sandeep, 1 minute, if I can give Sandeep. I mean, Sandeep, I had asked you that question. What are the obstacles you think which we need to really remove for the sector, which will make it really grow robustly? You and Shilpi also, one word.
I think obstacles is just about knowledge and experience sharing. So one thing is definitely I'm making an attempt to do that, and capital is something which needs to come from various other sources to scale up, because infrastructure cannot be created constantly for free.
Okay, great, thanks. Shilpi, would you like to say something?
Yes. So in addition to what Sandeep said, the skilling of the stakeholders, whether it is definitely it comes under knowledge, but yes, skilling of the ground staff, skilling of the people who are doing door-to-door collections, to who are at the recycling center. So that will also bring a major change in this.
Okay, I'm looking at the chat section, and there's one very intriguing question. And I think this is the question says, is there a framework that can be followed by social enterprises to follow? This is by Deepta Naha. And I think this is a very pertinent question, because maybe there are people out there, manufacturers out there, social entrepreneurs out there, who want to follow principles of circular economy, minimize waste. What is the support infrastructure or framework for such people?
So there are a huge amount of fund available with the Swachh Bharat mission. And if you have a very much doable model, and if you can convince the government stakeholders, definitely there is an opportunity for you. Secondly, rightly, like various other UN agencies, and we are also very much keen to understand and implement any new model, and model not only to cater the waste, but also to address the social challenges or the challenges that the bottom of the pyramid are facing. So any such if any such proof of concept is also ready, so there is an open market, right from innovators to startups to government fundings. Everything is available. One need to find their way out of it. Today's India is very much progressive, and it is moving towards an equal opportunity platform. So I'll say that if one has a framework, they should reach out to us. Definitely, we'll look into it.
Thank you, Shilpi. That's a positive note to end. I think it's been a great discussion. I hope the audience benefited, and if there are any more questions, they can still keep sharing with the CSR Box team. And with this, I would really love to thank Shilpi, Shalini, Sandeep for your very insightful comments, and your experience clearly shows through. Once again, thank you to the CSR Box team, and we look forward to further discussions. And some of us are already collaborating, so we'll keep working together. Thank you very much.